Hmm.
It's a good thing
Wow. I didn't notice that,
that
but
you hadn't been singing. Normally, you start off by, well, not normally, but often you start off by singing. And
wow.
yeah,
Wow. So that song was so I did piano lessons while growing up, and I would get there and it would be an hour's like hour an hour it would be an hour, and I would go in and do it, and then I would run away from it and go and play basketball. How
you're
I
like,
wish
did it, check that box.
how I wish I stayed, and now I would be such a I would do some crazy things on that thing.
So do you still play at all just for fun?
I nah nah
No? Do you have a piano?
no
Well,
no.
that's probably partly why.
And even if I had though, I don't think the only time I look at it, I would think when I go to a church or somewhere and I see someone playing, I would say, wow, I could have been, and I know I would be so dramatic when I'd be like, oh, let's make sure we're sharing to the proper places while people are coming to see our would have been, yeah, would have been stories.
Would have been piano stories. So I have a piano story, not
You
because I
do?
play piano. I mean, we all did the
Okay,
chopsticks thing. So
gotcha.
my parents got a piano because they always wanted us to play, and my brother did take lessons for a very short time and then just didn't want to continue.
Uh-huh.
But then later picked it up. Like I think if I remember correctly, it was towards the end of middle school. I think it was before high school, but he just
Okay.
started sitting down on the weekends when he felt like it, and he taught himself how to play a lot of
Wow.
stuff. And so it was that intrinsic motivation, right? It was extrinsically motivated. My parents tried everything to get him to do it, earlier on. And it was just, it was this beautiful grand piano, baby grand piano sitting in the living room with nobody
Uh-huh.
playing it. And I still remember the guy coming and tuning it. And I was always like, why are we having this guy tune the piano and nobody's playing it? Like, in case somebody who knows how to play piano comes into the house, it's tuned, right? It's just silly. But yeah, he just then all of a sudden went, and my brother's been kind of one of those people, where he would just be inspired. Like he dropped out of sorry, Mark, if you don't want me to tell this story, I'm gonna tell it anyway. He dropped he dropped out of undergrad after I
Uh-huh.
think a year. Like he went back his second year, didn't finish it. And he was studying, I don't know if it was architecture or something to do with building design, basically design. He
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't ready, I don't think, to be in school. And so my parents are like, okay, well, if you decide to go back, you'll be paying for it yourself, right?
Gotcha.
If you're going to drop out, and it wasn't too long afterwards. I think a couple of years, he was helping my grandmother. My grandfather passed away, and he was helping my grandmother downsize. And so my grandfather was what we call a professional hobbyist.
Okay.
He had all these hobbies he would do, and he would do them like a professional. And one of his professional hobbies was photography. He was a brilliant photographer. He took the most amazing, and my uncle, his
Mm-hmm.
youngest, his only child. Actually, my father was adopted by my grandfather, so he wasn't his actual child, but his
Okay.
child, my father's half brother, became a photojournalist. And is amazing photographer in his own right. But my grandfather passed away and had this body of work, this photography work. I mean, even handwritten notes by Ansel Adams, if you know who Ansel Adams
Well,
is. I mean,
mm-hmm.
it kind of interesting. But as Mark was going through these books and helping her clean out his darkroom and all this stuff, he just got engrossed in
Hmm.
photography. And all of a sudden, after the end of this project, comes home and announces he's interested possibly in going back to school for photography. Had to pay his own way, but ended up
Mm-hmm.
getting into a school in Chicago, and that's exactly what he studied, photography.
Wow.
And it
Wow.
was just picked it up and decided that he wanted to do that. And so it's kind of neat when you see people just get called to certain things and they follow that calling. And
Yeah. And it's I'm searching for the right word. It's fulfilling that they uncovered what it is that they're supposed to be doing, and they do it rather than mom, dad, sister, brother, which sometimes do help us to define the way. But when you can find a way, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Think about the time where you're looking at that there's no manual for it, that
Yeah.
gadget, and you're looking at it and saying, gosh, and then you're the childlikeness comes up in you, and you're just inquisitive, and you're just touching buttons, and okay, that didn't work. But then maybe I should change to a different angle with my thumb, with my index finger, and then when it works, you go, oh, yes. I think
Yeah.
that's uncovering that which you have. Oof. Even
When
with
you
somebody
just
assisting you, that's something great.
Well, you just said something so interesting, how these things always come up. So I was doing a podcast interview earlier today, and one of the things that she asked me was takeaway for leaders in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, what do you help your leader clients do? And I said, well, one of the things that I'm really talking a lot about is finding this way to step into curiosity. Because if we think about when we learned the most is when we were kids. And what did we have the most of when we were kids? Was curiosity, right? And we slowly get away from curiosity because we're so, as we get older, we're so worried about how we look and what that means and our value and and all that. And whereas kids were like, whatever, I'm really curious and learn. And so if we want to be adaptable and we want to be creative and innovative and all the things you just described, being in that zone of curiosity is absolutely imperative.
Must.
And so how do we start building that, start talking about I said it can start even with the inner dialogue where you say something and I was immediately offended. I can start getting curious about that. Like, he said that, I got offended. Instead of just pushing back, like, why don't I get curious about that? What is it? Where did that reaction come from?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And even if the
Yes.
person meant to trigger you, you can still be curious. Because people say, yeah, they didn't mean it, so get curious. But it's like, even if they did mean it, we still can get curious, and that curiosity opens us up to see things that when we're in this, I know what he means, and I know
Yeah.
what the way it needs to be, or what he really meant, and he meant to do this and all of this, and decide that we're just going to write that story and solidify it in black ink, indelible black ink. We're not being very curious.
Correct. As you were saying that, what I saw was creating the framework in order for that to blossom. So there are a couple different teams I've led, and every single time in the introduction of the project, I would go, we will put our titles down at the door. One, we will come in here being very, very inquisitive. We will come with low tolerance of somebody accusing, somebody saying something to us and we're getting upset. We will dive in with curiosity, and we will uncover things that we never knew. But if you think you're coming into this team knowing things before you enter, because you haven't met the 5 or 6 or 10 people in this room ever, and you think you know more than they do, then we don't need you here. And we go, okay, great. Now, having said that, when we do get into the discussions, we're humans. I will find somebody going, no. I'm like, no, you can't say no. You have to say and they go, okay, you're right. And in that environment where people understand that they aren't right, they aren't wrong, that the brainstorming process is just that we are brainstorming to create something and innovate. Oh my goodness, that environment is such a beautiful learning environment that when we do come out of it, it allows us to grow. We have grown in that environment. So when we're speaking, as we're engaging with individuals, I think it's so appropriate that we go with that mindset. This person, or I don't even put it on the person. I don't know a lot. I'm about to learn from this person. And if this person says something to me that triggers me, I mean, I keep it down and ask more questions and be curious about it.
Mhm.
Right.
That's
So
it. And you
it's,
said something really important when we're creating those environments, right, where innovation can happen.
mhm,
And it's not just innovation, it's where we can really come together collaboratively, even from diversity,
yeah,
right? So we may all be coming from diverse, perspectives and backgrounds and experiences and all that, but that even within diversity, we can create that collaborative space. You talked about boundaries and creating the boundaries. Some people say the rules of the road, right? We're going to set the rules of the road. Boundaries are so important because a lot of people think,
yes,
talking about boundaries are akin to talking about putting up walls. And it's like boundaries and walls are two separate things. If we don't have the boundaries of, the important things that we're going to be mindful about, like being reverent to one another's ideas, even if we're internally thinking that's not going to work, you don't need to say that externally, right? Because you don't know. Back to your point of saying, you may think, but this is the thing, is we can always say, when we go back to the three brain conversation,
hmm,
what we think is based on past knowledge that we have.
yep,
So it's either something we've experienced or not experienced, or something somebody's told us, but it's not all the past experience available.
yeah.
So somebody else's experience might have
Oh
been
my
completely
goodness.
different in the past. And so we're sitting there going, yeah, that won't work. And I know, according to my past experience, well, you haven't had every experience in the book, right? Maybe that's it. That person's experience is that they did do this another time and it worked, right?
Yes.
You don't know. And so I really love that, but setting the stage where it's
Mm,
safe for people to put forward their perspectives, their ideas, again, even their experiences,
yes.
without the fear of being judged, having their personal value be judged according to someone else's story about what they're offering.
Correct.
That is
Wow.
those boundaries are so
Wow.
necessary. And we try to do all the band-aiding in corporations or businesses where, we put the rules in place to keep
Mm,
people, but then what we're really not doing is cultivating the cultural environments that
yeah.
allow for everything you just said.
Yeah. And Tracy, we talk, I know, your clients, executive leadership, but we also come to life, period. It's it's the girlfriend and the boyfriend is the husband and the wife of friends. Every single relationship we have, I believe we do a disservice when we begin and we don't put those boundaries in place. Because
Yes.
when we do agree on the boundaries, like in these meetings, I would have a word, a safe word, when somebody, and it was anybody's choice to state the safe word that someone was breaking the rule. So if something crazy like uh dum dum or bum bum, or something crazy, just say something that we agree. And when the person says it, the person who was breaking it would burst out laughing. And it wasn't uh a verdict, a gavel coming down on them like you did something wrong. It was something humorous that we all say, "Whoop, gotcha!" And we'll go, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, let's
It's a
rephrase,
redirect.
let's redirect, correct."
Yeah.
And it would rephrase it and come up with it. So it
Mm.
it's things that my wife and I said that when we're dating, said, "Well, we'll never, when I marry you, we are not going to use the divorce word." Now,
Mm.
now there are certain things that divorce comes in and it's necessary to do, right? I'm not saying if it did come to that, we wouldn't visit, not saying, right? But I'm saying we said we will discuss
Mhm.
and we will investigate. Divorce will not be the first option to any problem in our relationship.
It won't be our intention.
It would, correct. So in these past 21 years of marriage and how many years of dating, when we do come to these hurdles, and the conversation is hard. And I go, I said, we're sticking to the fundamentals, right? She goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. So what are the options here?
Give me the parameters.
yes. But it's so important to set those parameters up, to set those boundaries, and the boundaries. I've seen these rules where it says rule number 1, respect always. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. Right.
Yes,
I love those because
I
if
love
you do
those too.
so many, it's so hard to think about, and it creates a conflict in you, and you're not free to speak. But if you have a simple boundary that says this is it, but let's go for it, I think you're in fertile ground where things can happen for good.
And I also agree that sometimes we come up on boundaries we didn't know we had. And so being able to advocate for those boundaries, worthiness is not simply knowing our value and expecting other people to treat us that way. It's really advocating for that value, because not everybody's going to be on the page of treating you respectfully, even when you deserve respect. And so really it's being able to say, I'm going to assume you didn't mean that in a harsh way. And yet when you say X, Y, and Z, you're saying you're doing the pointing finger thing. And I'm saying that I'm happy to have this discussion, but if it's going to be a finger pointing, I'm going to bow out. That's setting a boundary.
Wow.
And it's doing it in a very respectful way. I mean, it maybe the person just got all riled up and then they started to go at it. And because many people say, oh, I'll just walk away, or I'll just ghost. I'm like, well, ultimately, how do you feel? Well, I feel like I stood up for my rights. I said, ultimately, how do you feel? That was a defensive response to my question. I stood up for my rights.
Correct.
Ultimately, how do you feel? Do you feel complete in that engagement? No. What would you have really liked to say? Well, I would have really liked to point out to the person where they were coming across in a way that maybe they didn't intend to, but that was keeping me from really wanting to be open to the conversation. Okay, then say that. Because walking away and leaving things unfinished, I mean, yeah, sometimes we do have to walk away because somebody's really being abusive. I mean, like you said about divorce, I mean, there are those instances
Correct.
where, those things might have to happen. But ultimately, if we're talking about process and we're talking about intention, I think a lot of people, without thinking about it, put themselves in a victim position where they're like, well, they didn't respect me. So, Jeff and I had an interesting conversation. You'll appreciate this, I think, a couple of days ago. It was a Facebook post.
Okay.
And he read it to me and he said it was this. So hopefully I'm not offending anybody by saying this, but it was a picture of these women who were scantily clad.
Okay.
They had these shorts all the way up and the shirts all the way down. And the post was, do you agree or disagree? So I guess it was a poll post that when women, it said specifically women, when women dress in a way that garners disrespect, should they be respected? And and when he read that, I said, well, first of all, I can tell you who posted that. It was a man. He says, yes, it was a man. I said, it wasn't a neutral post. So these polls that people put out, a lot of times you have to remember, if you're really polling, make sure you're polling based on a statement or a question that's neutral.
Correct.
Not a leading question.
A-B neutral.
Be neutral. If that's your purpose, is to really get people's feedback, or if you're not just stating what you think.
Yes.
People hide behind these polls, they think that they're like, I'm going to make it look like I really care what other people say, when it's really a place to just state what they think.
True.
But, and I said to Jeff, I said, I think there are two things that need to be distinguished here. I think, and I'm saying this because I feel like in culture, we've made them one and the same. If you act in a way that's respectful, you deserve respect. And these are two separate things. I think as human beings, we deserve respect. Whether we act in a way that allows ourselves to be respected or not is a separate thing. Assuming that just because someone is dressed a certain way, that they are, well, if you're not going to respect yourself, I'm not going to respect you. Okay, that is a gross over. First of all, that person could feel that the style of clothing or cultural, whatever it is honoring and celebrating their body. Let's just say they're seeing it that way. They're like, I like the way I look. I'm going to, I'm celebrating my form.
Yep.
And someone else's interpretation of that is something different, right? Is that you're disrespecting yourself by wearing clothes that show too much of you.
Yep.
Those are very different. This person, the reason why they're dressing that way is not for the reason the person is judging them. So to walk over the line and say, well, you're acting, you're just disrespecting, because what Jeff said, he goes, well, a lot of men will feel like, and this is where, it's like, well, how men are biologically. If you show us skin, we're going to have, and I said, well, then it's your responsibility to be in charge of that, not mine.
Yeah.
And I think for so long, we have said that how someone else acts, they're now responsible for how you react. And we all need to be in charge of our own stuff.
Oh my goodness, Traci. Keep talking, girl. I see more. Are you okay?
So I said, I'm going to say this very neutrally because it's a histrionic thing. And coming from a woman, this is not, I'm not so, every woman to some extent has been sexually disrespected, I think, unfortunately. If you're of a certain age, you've had those experiences. And my thing is not to do a male bashing thing, because I don't feel it's a male problem. I feel it's a cultural problem that's been perpetuated by both men and women. But I think it's important to say that, your assumption, first of all, there's two separate things. Is if you're saying, the whole respect, disrespect conversation is separate from the reaction to the way somebody's dressing. So if you react in a certain way because that's makes you react a certain way, you're still in charge of your own actions. It doesn't matter if this person triggered you physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, you're still in charge of your own reaction. And to say, well, when you put it out there, what do you think I'm going to think? Well, I don't know, but you're still in charge of that. And throughout history, and even judicially speaking, for so long, and in some places, some cultures, it's still like this. Women have to cover themselves up so that men aren't uncomfortable. Really?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I'm saying this from this perspective because we want to look through a lens of multiple things. That's just one issue.
Correct.
We've got religious issues, political issues, all sorts of things that polarize in the same way. My point is saying, if you're coming from a perspective of when you do this, I do that, then you're not taking responsibility for your piece.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to look at, is when people say, well, you offended me. I don't want to study that bit of information because I find it offensive. Okay, well, so you find it offensive. Have you communicated why? And I think to the point that the reason this even came up is I was thinking about advocating for your boundaries, right? So if something is uncomfortable, so many people just feel it and then just think because they're feeling it, everybody's supposed to just bow to making them more comfortable, as opposed to saying, why do you feel it? And part of advocating for our boundaries forces us to put that into a perspective and meaning that we understand. So it forces us to process our feelings into a rational thought.
Yeah.
Right. So it's I had this reaction, but then when someone says, okay, so explain to me what I did that was offensive, we have to explain it. We have to come up with the reasoning for why we're doing that. And it's forcing us to process.
Yeah.
Which most people right now are not doing. They're not processing their emotions. They're merely acting on them and moving on.
Yeah.
And they're not even asking themselves, one, why am I feeling this way? Two, is this my responsibility to do something about this? And three, if so, what is my responsibility? What is it that I'm meant to do with this information? And then four, how am I meant to do that? it makes us take accountability in our own lives,
Yeah.
as opposed to just reacting constantly and then thrusting the responsibility for changing the things that are uncomfortable onto somebody else.
Wow, you know, I know the example. I don't know. I have to go back to the example. I have to go back to the example. I, I've heard the excuse, she shouldn't dress that way because she dressed that way, rather. That's why I did it.
Right. She asked for it.
She asked for it. Your kid should not be going out like that because they'll get it, right? What are they really what are they really getting? They're getting your inability to respect yourself. They're getting the your vice, the thing that holds you. You're saying, I can't control it because somebody else did something that triggered it. So you're not a master of yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're saying, I'm not a master of myself. And that's what we're attempting to do in this world. So I'm going to segue it because it's exactly what I was meditating on this morning, and it's so, when you said it, and I was like, oh my goodness, this woman. I'm meditating, and I'm meditating on having a mind of Christ. Up leveling my thinking, up leveling who I am. And I'm thinking it through, and I'm thinking it through, and I'm thinking it through. And then I'm meditating, and it's, wow, the mind of Christ is really loving your neighbor as yourself. So if I come out dressed in a particular way and I really love myself, I'm expecting my neighbor to love me, not to disrespect me. But that's not so much it. But here's where it was that I dug in and I went, I get it. As I'm engaging with anybody, with anyone, and they abuse me, they curse me, they do something to me that triggers something in me, right? My goal is to address it, but not address it in hate.
Right.
Not address it in confusion, because most times when you are addressing it and you're addressing it in hate, you are addressing it with a reaction. You then turn to be the bad one in the conversation.
Right.
You,
Yeah, you look
tend
like
to
the
become
villain. Yeah,
the villain, correct?
when you may very well have an incredibly important thing to say, the person
Yes.
Immediately, yes.
Yes. So it's always, and we always say this, is all about the motive, right? Your intention. So when I'm up leveling my mind in love, when I'm replying to X about what she or he did to me, my reply is done with love. And it's not to bring that person down, because I truly believe in karma. That if you don't allow me to have this conversation with you, I will not be a trash can of that which you said, and I'm not going to embody it and run with it. Because of the love piece, I'm going to let it shed off me and say, somebody's going to train you. Somebody's going to tell you this, not in the way that I was about to tell you, but it's going to be in such force, a forceful way that you may be that may be the only way you would understand it, but more so, it will also hurt you when you're learning the lesson. Whereas you would have learned the lesson here in a conversation that was enveloped in love, in reverence, in respect of one another. And then just a meditation going on, and that I came to the conclusion that, okay, I should not rush. I'm driving somewhere, and someone cuts in front of me, and I go, flip the bird. Yeah. I should control this thing and say, I'll take my time. Because every time when we are in rush, when we are off our core values, When we
Mhm.
aren't aligned with our core values, that's when we begin to do things uncanny. We start to disrespect. Start to be irreverent. We
Yeah.
start to do things outside of our boundaries. And then when we find ourselves, we go, why did I do that? Oh, I'm sorry. So instead of apologizing, let's be in the moment.
Yes,
Stay
I
in the
love
moment.
that. You know, you said something that really made me think actually about my husband. So he has this personality that's people love about him, which he's
Mhm.
very, you know, even if you come to him with a heated thing or you
Mm.
respond to him in a heated way, because he's so curious, he's so naturally curious. And that can sometimes, right now with my daughter being a teenager, she's like, oh my God, Dad, stop asking me so many questions, you know. His curiosity can be annoying to her at times. But his natural curiosity, I think, keeps him in this place where he's a thinker, right?
Mhm.
So when you present anything, you know, in neutrality, in emotionality, in
Right.
whatever, he's like curious, right? So it's like, oh, I'm getting somebody approaching me in anger. I'm curious what, and
What?
he stays in this state of curiosity because it's in his mind. For those of us who are more emotionally and sense oriented inclined,
Mhm.
we also, because we've been conditioned to work with stuff in our brain, we know how to catalog and categorize and organize our
Mhm.
thoughts. IQ, we know everything about it, and we're very, very well rehearsed in this space.
Correct.
But for those of us who are heart gut people, we haven't been, you know, even as like me being a woman, you know, even as a woman, that's where we come from a lot of times. It hasn't been culturally really focused upon,
Mm.
right? Most of the time, if you're in emotionality, it's like, oh, stop being so emotional, right?
Mm.
But that's where we gather information. And so if that information isn't processed similar to my husband processing his stuff in his brain to come up with,
Yeah.
oh, I'm curious, like, so let me process this and come up with some questions to ask or some, you know, whatever, let me work with this.
Yeah.
We just stuff it in. And so that's where oftentimes if you process things, they don't build up. If you don't process them, they do build up. So if you
Mhm.
haven't had to, you don't have a mental buildup, right? Things that you allow yourself to be curious about, and you know, you
Yes.
work out to the nth degree, you move on, right? You're
Yeah.
not carrying baggage up there.
Correct.
And my husband's so curious that he doesn't carry baggage. He works it out until he's done with it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think that this is another little side thing when it comes to people being like, why can't I be more like this person? Why can't I be more rational when people come to me in these excitable states?
Mm.
It could be because that's not where you live normally, that your innate self is more of a heart gatherer or gut gatherer of
Mm.
information, and that you just haven't learned how to process and utilize that appropriately. You have pent up, built up, non processed stuff that you're carrying around. And so then as soon as that gets triggered, all the stuff comes out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and for people, like I said to my husband the other day, we had something we needed to discuss. I sat down first and I said, okay, bear with me because I'm going to try to translate what I'm sensing, because I realized I'm actually more of a sense
Gotcha.
perceptor. Information for me comes first through my
Yeah.
senses,
Senses.
my gut sense, my intuition.
Mhm.
And then I have to translate it into what am I feeling about it? What am I thinking about it? So by knowing that, I'm like, okay, something's coming through in sense to me. Let me sit with it for a little bit and see if I can translate it up.
Uh-huh.
And I realized that I haven't given myself in the past that time to translate.
Gotcha.
And my own frustration with the expectation that I should be able to just sense it and then communicate it is what causes the frustration, not the person
Correct.
I'm dealing with then.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so when I take that pause now, I'm like, I know that I'm getting it from another place and it's going to take a little bit of time. I can then communicate that and not get frustrated with myself, therefore not projecting frustration on other people. I realized it had nothing to do with what I thought, which was, why don't they see what I see? It was more, how come I can't translate it fast enough? Well, because it's coming from a different brain.
Right.
So anyway,
Wow.
it's been kind of
Wow.
an interesting
But
unfoldment.
isn't that amazing though? And I see that. In fact, before I go further, Roy, thanks for being on. A couple other people, Roy goes, explaining your emotion. That is really perceptive. Ask someone to explain a reaction based on their emotion. Don't react when people do things in a disrespectful way. But thank you, Roy, and all of you eavesdroppers who are truly eavesdropping today.
They're
um,
quiet listening.
I know, but as you were saying that, isn't that the growth, the growth in you, the growth in us when we can sit and be introspective and say, "Oh my goodness, I'm a sensing person, a gut sensing person." So when I have to give myself the the grace, the grace to process this thing and then bring it up so that the conversation doesn't seem like I am beating on the person who's listening,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That is so mature. That is so mature. It's and all of us are in there somewhere in some form or the other, where your husband is curious, he's way on the other end where he's like, okay, but then the person who is asking those questions will be like, man, you're questioning me, you're not just taking what I'm saying, what's wrong with you, right? So there's so many different permutations that exist. But I think for us to come to the point to understand ourselves, I'll share who am I in this process. I'm not the guy who would be witty off the cuff, let when I'm hurt or when you've hurt me, right?
Mhm.
I am more of a, did they really say that? And then
You're curious too.
I go, okay. And people who are around when it occurs, I don't know, did I tell you the story about the guy at the gym who cussed me out?
No, I
Oh,
don't think so.
so, I'm trying to use two cable machines, right? Two cables, so doing something with my shoulders and chest, and I'm going at it. I leave, I leave one and I go to the other I'm done with two, so I'm using one. I leave to go and get uh what you call it?
Spray
Uh,
bottle?
no, I leave to get another attachment
Oh, got
for
it.
it. So I get the attachment, but I'm far from where my machine is. So it takes me about 30 seconds to a minute, but I kept my water bottle and my phone there. I walk back and this dude who was maybe double my size in width, right? But I go and I say, excuse me, and he's about to use both. And I go, excuse me, and then I point down to my water bottle and my phone, telling him I was here. And he goes, MF. And I'm just standing, and there are a lot of people around. And I go, and the testosterone in me is rising because this dude is putting me down, and I can't look like a fool. What's wrong? And I'm looking at him, and then my spirit's telling me, mm-mm, mm-mm, mm-mm. And I go, sir, I need to use it. So he flips me off and said, God, you can use it. And I was like, thank you. And I got it. And I started to exercise. I looked across from me, it's empty. Okay. He goes back to his single machine on the other end. And I look and I say, poor you. I start to exercise. I'm processing now.
Mhm.
I'm processing. And then the spirit tells me, he needs two. You need one. Go to him and tell him, hey, dude, you can come and use my two. I can use your one. I was like, but no, the way he cursed me up, heck no. So pride starts to rise. I go, and I continue. And then the spirit says, hey, Wulwyn, go and do it. I do it. I go to him. I say, excuse me. I said, you need two, right? I said, well, since you need two and I need one, you know, we can switch up and you can go. And he looks at me like, oh, okay, thank you. Now, there's more I have to say to this guy. There's so much more I have to say to him, but I can't because I'm looking at him like, and God, the Holy Spirit is leading me because my flesh wants to choke him and say a whole lot of stuff that I can't. So I go and I tell him, and then the Holy Spirit tells me, Tracy, this is beautiful. He says, Wulwyn, he is gonna come back to you and apologize. I was like, I don't want his apology. I want to clear things up with him. Long story short, Tracy, 30 minutes later, I'm doing something in another section of the gym. This big dude who is Mr. Macho, who was abusing me in front of 5 or 6 people, walks up to me sheepishly and apologizes to me. I am so sorry for how I acted to you. I was rude. I wasn't who I'm supposed to be. You were right, and da da da. And I looked at him and said, but what's going on? Are you okay? And then the story. Just got a divorce, just lost $500,000 in the divorce. I'm pissed off. I'm this. And I say, yeah, I say, you know what? The Spirit told me about it. That's why I asked you. I reacted to you the way I did. But here it is, Tracy. Had I abused him, had I reacted the way that he disrespected me, the end result of him coming to apologize to teach me that I did the right thing, even though in my heart I was saying, brother, can I just say a word or two to him? Right? But isn't this how the world, isn't this the way it's supposed to be? That when
Yes.
somebody does come to you and it hits you, Roy says, good for you, Wally.
Yeah, no kidding.
Isn't it? But really, Roy, Tracy, the end result is always to let someone find they're wrong and go, oh my goodness, I really was wrong. And not you coming
Or
and
not.
beating it. True,
Yes.
true, yeah, true. And not me coming and beating it, because had I gone in and said, what I would have done was a couple minutes later, I who went away from my core values would have been going, oh,
Yeah. You would have had to apologize to yourself.
yes,
Yeah.
that is it. I would have had to come and apologize to myself. And I didn't apologize to myself.
You felt really
He
good
came
about
running
yourself.
and saying, I'm sorry. And I went, wow, a lesson in listen to the Spirit, being humble, because what his abuse to me, what did it do to me? What, somebody cussing me up, what did it really do to me, Tracy? Nothing.
It did what you allowed it to do, which wasn't much.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I pray that we don't, when somebody, it's somebody, it's the infinitesimal, a tiny part of the brain, because they can't process that you're allowing them to come and take your entire being, move you off center, and start to react to a fool. Like the way we say in Africa, if a dog bites you, you really
You
gonna
bite the
bite the
dog.
dog?
And people think about that, they're like, of course you don't. Well, so I love Gandhi's quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. And that's really, I mean, you're breaking the cycle, because if you had responded in kind, it would have perpetuated that cycle of hate and negative reaction. And so in order to be the change, if we want things to be better, we have to be better.
We have.
And even if he had not come back to you and apologized, you still could have felt good about, it's never about the outside world. We say, oh yeah, that person came back and validated me, but we don't really need the validation. The validation is when, we live in closest proximity to ourselves. It's going to be important that I like myself very much if I live closest to myself,
I like that.
So, I think that's the thing, is at the end of the day, you can be pleased with the integrity that you've kept within yourself.
Ooh, love that word.
right? Aside from how I love that story. That is such a great story. Well, and
Yeah.
especially in today's world where we can justify, and we always do, we can legitimately justify a lot of our internal or external reactions to things.
Yes.
But is it making the change we wish to see in the world happen? It's not. It's perpetuating the exact same cycle over and over and over again. So you broke the cycle. And from that place, not only were you able to be in integrity, but he was able to come back and meet you in that space of integrity. He chose to, which is what was so empowering, right? It was an empowerment engagement as opposed to a disempower one where you're trying to perpetrate his apology, right? And so I just think that is such a beautiful example of exactly, I mean, when we really think about it, it's like, okay, from an intentional standpoint, what do I want the outcome to be? It isn't about being, I mean, ego is only about the short term, the momentary short term. I'm going to one up you. I want to be safe, look good, be comfortable, right? And be secure. And so that's all the ego cares about. But that's a short-term fix, right? So if we keep band-aiding with the ego, we will be in short-term fix all the time and we'll never feel really satiated. Satiation comes from being in complete alignment with our soul, right? With our integrity and everything that falls into that category. So that's very well done.
No, I cannot take it. I cannot take that as myself, because I think I have to see the meditations, we talk about this meditations and all of that, where you can put yourself in a frame of mind that something happens to you like that, so that when it does happen, you're prepared, right? So that's what the meditation did for me. That's what loving my neighbor looks like, right? When our religious views, our political views, our morals do not align, but I cannot shoot somebody who didn't have the similar upbringing as I did. Rephrase. I cannot shoot somebody who doesn't have a similar upbringing, who's coming from a different background, like what we talked about, that they have their various experiences, and I've had mine, and I think mine's right and theirs wrong. But no, the person, that's what the background is. And until we dialogue, until we come in and really talk about, here's why I think this way, here are my reasons, and they tell me, and truth always wins. Truth, and I'm not saying facts, because facts are different from truths. Truths always win, always. And when we come from a place of truth, when we're true to ourselves and we come and engage in a conversation where we're both saying, let's listen, truth will always win, and not Wulwyn winning or Traci winning. Truth wins, and we run away with the truth.
No, it's beautiful. Well, it's that third that, they always talk about that third thing, that everything's in a trilogy. And I think, really quickly, you can, and I'm going to just put this up for consideration. I mean, as much as we may look to God as our guidance, we still get to own our actions.
Drop the mic, baby.
Yeah. So when I said nice job, you can own your actions.
Oh, gotcha.
You may have been inspired spiritually.
Gotcha. I hear you.
Definitely can own those actions, because that's all us. And I think that's really an important distinction to be made. But, where we are now, I cannot impress upon, where people just like, what's the takeaway? What's the takeaway? The biggest takeaway is, do the inner stuff. Do the inner stuff. Be curious. I mean, it's interesting. So last month, I have all these sticky notes on my computer. Last month, it came up in my meditation that I was supposed to keep track of. I don't know if you can see this, but it's backwards, but see what inspires gratitude.
Oh, I see it.
So the whole month, I was always looking through the lens. I would stop to take time to look through the lens of what I was experiencing inspired gratitude in me. And this month I was called to ask the question, what do I need to enjoy the process? So one of the things that has really come up a lot for me personally is curiosity.
Wow.
You know, what do I need, right? And what do I need to cultivate maybe, you know, to enjoy the process? Because finding joy in this life, I feel, is a very big part of the experience we came to have. Right. And I said to somebody who was doing a call with me the other day and possibly seeing if I could be on, if I was a good fit for his podcast, I said something like, I make decisions these days based on if it's going to be fun. And he says, well, and he was a very honest guy, which I appreciated. And he's like, well, that sounds, he goes, excuse me if this comes across in the wrong way, but you know, sometimes when people say that, it sounds kind of trite. So I can understand that. I said, let me explain to you what because I'm going to ask you, what is your definition of fun? I said, when I am fully allowing myself to experience, you know, again, a full bodied experience of what it is that I'm engaging in, right? So what are the lessons? What is the thing that I'm discovering that I maybe didn't know before? You know, really fun is more of a deep dive. It's not superficial fun. I mean, although that's fine too. I'm not talking about going out and drinking and partying and that kind of fun. I'm talking about a deeper connection between aligning with myself and my experience and bringing myself into the equation, because half the time people are not living a life. They're showing up for one. But the main common denominator that's missing is themselves. Like, I'm doing this for my community. I'm doing this for my, and I'm doing. And I'm like, well, where are you in this? Well, I don't know. I don't matter. It's all about everyone else. I'm like, hold on. You are the vehicle. You matter. All these other people matter too, but come on, let's get right with this.
Yes.
You get to be an active participant in everything you're living. That's fun for me. And when I'm aligned in that and I'm a participant in that, it's not that I'm just here to give for others. I'm also here to say, is this something I want to give for my own experience? Right? That I'm a part of this equation. I'm not just merely showing up for my life, right? I'm participating in it. And I'm also aware that I'm participating in it. And that's fun.
It's that awareness that's, and I think, wow. So what I'm hearing is if I'm in the moment, that's my thing. If I'm not, hey, I'm not going to be part of it, right?
I'm going to miss it. And that's when we oftentimes do miss it. Our kids grew up too fast. Oh, that time went too fast. It was because we weren't present and engaged and showing up in that experience as we were having it.
Oh dear, you bring those kids up now. So I would always say to myself, to my 1-year-old daughter or my 3-year-old son, and the 10, the 13, whatever it is, I would pause and go, remember this moment. Take a snapshot of this, because this is not coming back. It's going to come back in different ways, but this particular one, it's not coming back. So what I do in 2021 with a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old is I go, do you remember that when you were a kid, when you were a baby? And I bring a picture. I say, you remember you laying on my chest and you only had just to go from my neck down to my navel? I wasn't that small. Oh, yes, you were. Oh, really? Yeah, you were. You know what? I said, come, no. And here's the picture, but here's more. Here's the part that gets them. I said, come here. And I'm on the bed, right? And I said, lay on the side. There you go. I said, how does that feel? And they go, stop. Or I'm sitting in this chair, right? And I said, come sit on my lap. I said, come on, give me a hug. We have to be, and what I'm building is, yes, I'm reliving that, but they're present in my hugs. I'm present in their hugs. And we're creating something in 2021 that when 2040 comes around, we go, hey, you remember? Come here, sit, hug. You know, it's you. See, I'm a touchy-feely guy. I'm affectionate. I love to hug. I love, and my Verlin isn't affectionate. She's she's a mother. She's caring. She doesn't express it like
She
that,
wants
right?
her love languages, acts of service,
That's
and probably also time.
oh
Right?
my
She likes quality time.
but, ah,
Oh, he just went off the screen.
ah, ah, God, yes, yes. And mine is not that. So this is bringing a new conversation 5 minutes to so
But we can
close.
always have that conversation because that dynamic is the same one I have with my husband. Exact same dynamic I have with my husband.
So who's the affectionate one?
He is. He's the touchy-feely guy, and I'm acts of service and time. Yeah, gift. Yeah, yeah.
I can't understand y'all. I can't
I know, I
understand
know, I
y'all.
know.
I can't understand y'all. Why can't you? Oh
And I'm always
man.
like, okay, I'm touching you.
That's what, and guess what? When she does it, I go, that's not you. That's you,
That was my husband.
you're
He's like,
forcing this
okay,
thing.
this is all I'm getting, I guess. I'll take it. But geez. Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, I think that would be a love language conversation could be a really good one.
We should, you know.
Well, along the lines of what you just said, I was thinking about, and that is so important. I'm so glad you brought that up. Like my husband last night, I went to go pick up my daughter from her first game, her first volleyball game.
Okay.
And he's like, can I come? He goes, I want to be there when she gets in the car to talk about her first game. Right? There will never be the first game again. There's one opportunity. And he knows also too, she's very chatty when she first, and then by the time she gets home, if he was at home asking the same, she's like, I'm done talking. Ask
gotcha.
If you want to get the first round of the true excitement, you got to be there.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. I love that. It's, and at the end of the day, though, what is it? Is it the clients? Is it yeah, it's how many people you change for the good, etc. But just that, your family, whatever family is defined as, mom, dad, brother, sister, uncles, aunts, whatever it is. But I think it's just the quality time we have in those moments where we can just be, because you're not Traci Phillips, the coach. Yeah. In those moments, your child doesn't see you're in your zone of genius is what it is. No, my child.
Oh no, she would not qualify. She would not allow that.
See, and they're just it's mom and dad and daughter and son and uncle and friend, because friends are part of our families, right?
Yeah.
Just wow, you got me. You touched a soft spot there.
I saw you in your love language. I acknowledge and I feel that that's exactly what we're talking about today, which is really showing up in your life, right? Because when you do, you bring all of the joy and glory of you forward.
Yeah.
My husband said that to me the other day when I was sharing something, that was a big aha for me, that was emotional. And he says, that right there, that's the you that I get to see that a lot of people don't. And which you'll appreciate, right? You appreciate that part too, and so when we show up and allow ourselves to be in that life, right? To be an active participant and member in that moment, we get to be seen for the full glory of who we are.
Yes. And we should not allow anybody, not your husband towards you or my wife towards me or the other way around, to disallow us from being ourselves. So if she's not affectionate, I shouldn't say because she's not affectionate. And it's coming back.
I don't feel loved.
Yeah, right. It's coming back to the point where somebody does something, it doesn't affect you. Not because she's not the touchy-feely, meaning that I should stop being touchy-feely to her because she likes that. Yeah, she likes that,
and that's who you are. Well, I think it goes back to what the gym story, and I think this is a great way to wrap up. Is the gym story was you were you, and by you being you, you allowed him to be him.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, the him he wanted to be in that moment was not the him he was being. And so he could go back and rectify that and be the him he wanted to be. Same way as when we're demanding another person love us the way we want to be loved, we're not giving them the opportunity to be inspired to do it from a place of who they are.
Mm. Mm.
And so, you know, we can communicate it. It's very important. That's, I think, where love language is, knowing them and knowing what we like is good to talk about. But when we then sit there kind of like a puppy dog waiting to be taken for a walk, you know, it's like, okay, now that you know, I like to be loved this way, you know, and it's obligatory at that point. And you're just like,
Right.
and the person's, well, I would have done it that way if I had been let to do that myself in my own time. Now I'm kind of feeling a little bit under pressure here.
Yes.
And it takes that inspired action away from the hands of the person that really it needs to be coming from. So.
Mm. And I'll just close this with Roy. Roy, fun has been happy. And he said, both people grew in the gym.
Oh.
And to know that we didn't even grow muscles. We grew love, right?
You did. Yeah, you grew brotherhood. You grew a lot of things.
We grew that. Not what we're expected to grow in the gym.
Nice.
Hey, y'all. Love you guys and love you too, Tracy. Thank you so much. See you in 2 weeks.
You bet.
Roy, be good, man.
That's right. Thank you, Roy.